Election time in West Germany, and a lively start to the campaign for the Social Democrats. The man they're applauding is Chancellor Willy Brandt, who led them to victory in 1969 and who's now seeking 4 more years in office. Herr Brandt squeezed in last time by the narrowest of margins, and all the signs are that if he makes it again, it won't be by much.
Unser Volk, dieses schwer geprüften und durch Irrungen und
Brandt's personal magnetism is undeniable. The opinion polls show that he's by far West Germany's most popular politician. And not surprisingly, his party's been quick to cash in on the advantage by trying to turn the election into a presidential-style contest between rival personalities. Herr Brandt's being presented to the country's 40 million voters as a kind of father figure. The Chancellor himself has encouraged this image in speeches that have an evangelical flavour. He's stressing such themes as the quality of life, the role of the state, and the partnership between the government and the individual, not the usual tactics of a politician at election time. There's little doubt that Herr Brandt's electoral techniques are evoking a strong response from his own supporters, and party morale is high. But there's less euphoria among the electorate at large, and he's not finding it easy winning conservative voters away from their traditional party loyalties. Despite his personal popularity, the opinion polls predict a very close result. The 496 members of West Germany's parliament, or Bundestag, are elected for 4 years by a complicated system of proportional representation. Parties must get at least 5% of the total vote before they get any seats in the House. In 1969, the Free Democrats, the smallest of the 3 major parties, got just enough to form the present coalition government with Willy Brandt's Social Democrats. Its overall majority was only 12, and when this disappeared during the summer, Herr Brandt was forced to call an election a year ahead of schedule. The Social Democratic Party headquarters in Bonn is known affectionately as the Shack, and it's from here that the SPD campaign is being directed. A great deal of thought has gone into the overall campaign strategy of using the Chancellor's personal standing to win votes for the party. The slogan, "Willy must remain Chancellor," is aimed primarily at the conservative middle classes. There's also been a significant change in the party colours. Posters and party bulletins used to be edged in revolutionary socialist red. Now black and gold have been added, the very respectable colours of the national flag. The image is everything, and the election posters show the Chancellor well tanned and youthfully handsome. The party is also concentrating on the Chancellor's record in foreign affairs. The voters are being reminded that they've got a successful and highly respected statesman as their leader, the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize last year, and a man who's already achieved some remarkable diplomatic successes with other European countries. So why change him? Herr Brandt's 3 years in office have seen what amounts to a revolution in West Germany's relations with communist Eastern Europe, what's known universally today as the Ostpolitik. It began, logically enough, with Russia. After 2 years of patient negotiation, Herr Brandt finally sat down with the Soviet leaders in Moscow in August 1970 and signed a treaty of friendship and non-aggression with Germany's greatest wartime enemy. The Moscow Agreement opened the way to other communist countries, and 4 months later, the Chancellor went to Poland. The reason for the visit was another treaty to normalize relations, but first, at the Warsaw Ghetto Monument, Brandt made a personal act of atonement for the excesses Nazi Germany committed in Poland during the war. The treaty itself cleared away all the misunderstandings that had plagued German-Polish relations since the war. The Oder-Neisse line, established by the Allies in 1945, whereby 40,000 square miles of German territory went to Poland, was recognized as the legal frontier. Brandt defended this controversial concession by saying that he wasn't giving away anything Germany owned now. In return, full diplomatic relations were established, and the Poles agreed to allow 120,000 former German citizens now living in Poland to emigrate to the West. The arrival 6 weeks later of a trainload of German Poles in West Germany was the first sign that the treaties were more than just bits of paper. The biggest uncertainty of the Ostpolitik has been relations with East Germany, particularly the ticklish questions of diplomatic recognition and the status of Berlin. Berlin, which lies geographically inside East Germany, belongs politically to neither East nor West. It's controlled by the Big Four powers, who've just reaffirmed their rights in the city, whatever settlement the two Germanys eventually reach. In theory, West Berliners are not permitted to vote in federal elections, and the city is represented in the Bundestag only by observers. Even so, Berlin is important in this election because 140,000 Berliners are also West German residents, and they are allowed to vote. And in such a close election, their influence could be decisive. For years, the Helmstedt crossing point on the road corridor to Berlin has been the scene of traffic queues and long delays. Now that's all over, because last month the two Germanys ratified a transport treaty, making east-west travel easier for both people and goods. Herr Brandt claimed it was a great humanitarian achievement. It also opened up vast prospects for German trade, and politically it's cleared the way for both countries to join the United Nations. Herr Brandt's critics say the agreement perpetuates the division between the two Germanys and point with some justification to the latest East German moves to install an automated system of booby traps along the entire 900-mile border. A few weeks ago, it looked as if this border issue would be a real stumbling block in the negotiations. Then, on the eve of the election, Herr Brandt achieved another breakthrough. The non-aggression treaty he'd been negotiating since June was finally initialed by officials of both sides in Bonn. It's closely modeled on the Moscow and Warsaw treaties in that it accepts existing borders and promises more cooperation. It also neatly sidesteps the fundamental issue of German unity by use of a convenient formula whereby Germany remains one nation but two states. Although the Ostpolitik is what Herr Brandt may be remembered for in history books, it's not the most important element in this election. In a recent opinion poll, no less than 93% of those questioned considered that the problem of inflation was the most important issue. Inflation in Germany is currently running at 6% a year, nearly double what it was when Herr Brandt's government first took office, but still quite modest compared with some other countries in Europe. The opposition says the government is to blame because it's spending too much. The government replies that this is an oversimplification and that inflation's an international problem caused by factors such as the Vietnam War, which are wholly outside West Germany's control. The Socialists' economic policies are the most vulnerable aspect of their record in government, and this is borne out by opinion polls which show that a majority of West Germans believe that the opposition Christian Democrats would make a better job of keeping prices down in the shops. It's not only inflation that's damaged the government. Disagreements within the party on a whole range of economic and monetary measures have also taken their toll. Last July, Karl Schiller, the economics minister, resigned. It was Schiller who virtually won the last election for the SPD single-handed, and who at the same time established a reputation as a financial wizard. He left the cabinet over the question of direct government interference in the running of the economy, and his loss could yet cost Brandt the election. Herr Brandt's best hopes for success lie with industry, which is now showing signs of heading for another boom. Only a few months ago, economists were talking of stagnation and the opposition party of economic ruin. But now the order books are filling, unemployment is practically non-existent, and industrialists are investing heavily. One reason for this is the continuing success of German goods in foreign markets, despite revaluation and inflation. The second reason is the moderate attitude taken by the trade unions over wage increases. The unions are almost unanimous in their support for Herr Brandt. They believe that he'll guarantee full employment and that the opposition's policy would create 5% unemployment as a way of restoring price stability. Chancellor Brandt's policies of rapprochement with Germany's old enemies were supposed to receive another seal of approval at the Olympic Games. The Games were meticulously prepared. The setting was beautiful, the design exciting, and the organization the best there's ever been. To many Germans, the event symbolized the final return of their country to a respectable place in the international community. In the normal course of events, this feeling would have had favorable political effects for Herr Brandt's government, but that possibility was cruelly shattered by the shooting of the Israeli athletes and the consequences of that bloody action. The debacle that followed at the military airbase near Munich, when German police marksmen rushed the Arab guerrillas but failed to save the lives of the Israeli hostages, and the successful hijacking by Arab guerrillas of a Lufthansa airliner last month, by which other Arab guerrillas were freed, has raised issues of national security in the present election campaign. At the time, most Germans sympathized with the Chancellor's difficult position. He'd tried to save the Israeli hostages and failed, and in the Lufthansa hijacking, he'd put the lives of German nationals before the enforcement of the law against those responsible for the Olympic shootings. But in the weeks since those events, voices have been raised against Herr Brandt, especially in Bavaria, for the way he handled the crises. In this election, Willy Brandt will be taking on a Christian Democratic Union which has got itself a new leader since the last campaign. He's Dr. Rainer Barzel, a clever and resilient politician who's remarkable for the number of ups and downs he's so far managed to survive in his political career. Since being elected a year ago, he's had a rough ride with the CDU, suffering 2 defeats which would probably have finished a less persistent man. In April this year, he directly challenged Herr Brandt in the Bundestag in what's called a constructive vote of no confidence. Had he won that vote, he would have taken over as Chancellor without the need for an election. But he failed because of defections in his own party. Even more damaging was his attempt to get the CDU to vote for the government's Warsaw and Moscow treaties, a maneuver that failed because of the intransigence of the party's right-wingers. Both experiences have given the impression, not surprisingly, that Dr. Barzel isn't really master in his own house. The CDU's headquarters in Bonn have a comfortable, solid look about them, as befits an organization that's always regarded itself as the true governing party of West Germany. In fact, the last 3 years are the only period the CDU's been in opposition since the Federal Republic was founded in 1949. But in those 3 years, the party's tried to modernize its image, even if its political message is still largely the same. "We build progress on stability" is the slogan this year. It's been attacked by younger party workers as too vague and too conservative. There are other problems too. Despite the American-style election stickers and the psychedelic pamphlet covers, the actual posters of Dr. Barzel seem to cast him in the same mold as his predecessors. As one SPD man said, they've made an old man of him. It was an impression reinforced at the party's election convention last month, when former Chancellor Ludwig Erhard came out to support the new leader and received almost as much applause. Also there was Kurt Kiesinger, whose defeat last time led to Dr. Barzel's election. Yet in fact, Barzel is not an old man. At 48, he's 10 years younger than Willy Brandt.
Wir wissen, Deutschland steht vor einer grundsätzlichen Entscheidung.
The difficulties that Dr. Barzel seems to be having with his image would perhaps be less important if he was fighting a hard-hitting polemical campaign against the government. But he isn't. His low-key speech at the convention disappointed many of his supporters who would have liked to hear him attack members of the government rather than expound the merits of a social market economy. Indeed, during the course of his address, Dr. Barzel had the embarrassing experience of watching some of his audience actually leave the hall. But he insists that most Germans are in no mood for a heated campaign, and that only a restrained approach will attract those voters in the center of Germany's political spectrum who are always the key to election success.
Auf Respekt, auf Toleranz und auf Rücksicht. Verleumdung zerstört neben dem, der sie ausspricht, vor allem den inneren Frieden.
The CDU will not campaign everywhere in Germany. By tradition, it leaves the contest in Bavaria to its sister party, the Christian Social Union, or CSU. Ever since democratic politics returned to Germany after the war, Bavaria's voted solidly for the CSU, and the CSU has always allied itself with the CDU in Bonn. Its leader is the ebullient, strong-willed and frequently outspoken Franz-Josef Strauss, in more ways than one, a towering figure in German politics. On his own ground, he can do no wrong. From his position as undisputed leader of the CSU, Herr Strauss has immense influence on the overall policies of the CDU, and more often than not, he gets his way. It was his implacable opposition to Brandt's Ostpolitik that drove a coach and horses through Dr. Barzel's attempts to come to a compromise with the government over the Moscow and Warsaw treaties. If the CDU win this election with CSU help, Strauss will become finance minister and number 2 in the federal government. But there are many who believe he will in effect be the power behind the throne. Franz-Josef Strauss is known to be an ambitious man. His critics would say he's also a dangerous one. They say he's a nationalist with strong right-wing views and that Germany can't afford any more of that kind. But Strauss himself insists that his concept of a strong Germany could only exist in the context of an even stronger united Europe. Perhaps the most important man in this election is the one with the smallest party, Walter Scheel, leader of the Liberal Free Democrats, or FDP, the junior partners in the present coalition government. The success or failure of the FDP may well decide the overall result. The party is fighting to keep the 6% of the vote it got last time. But in two recent local state elections, it lost ground to both the big parties. If it fails to get the 5% minimum, Willy Brandt would in effect lose 30 seats in Parliament at a single stroke, and that would probably put him back on the opposition benches.
Made in Germany, verbunden mit allen Qualitätsmerkmalen, die diese Bezeichnung nun einmal für alle Welt hat.
The Free Democrats have been a declining force in German politics for a number of years now, and the party suffered from an internal split 4 years ago when its right wing joined up with the CDU. But Herr Scheel has kept their chances alive by sheer force of his own personality. He's also been helped considerably by his own performance as foreign minister in the present government. The detailed work behind the Moscow and Warsaw treaties was largely of Herr Scheel's doing, and the FDP leader hasn't been slow to emphasize this contribution in the present campaign.
Die konsequent auf liberalen Prinzipien aufbaut, die unser liberales Angebot an die Bundesrepublik Deutschland ist, die Aussöhnung mit den Völkern.
Any hopes the CDU might have had that the Free Democrats wouldn't join another coalition with the Socialists were dashed by Herr Scheel himself when he firmly committed the party to supporting Chancellor Brandt as soon as the campaign began. By doing so, Walter Scheel is gambling on the party's traditional voters still giving him their support.
Sie wird nicht zurückgeschraubt in ihren Ansprüchen und in ihren Forderungen.
Willy Brandt called this election to give West Germany's voters the chance to return a government with a working majority. Such a government is certainly necessary. Germany occupies a key position in Europe, with two spheres of influence jostling for advantage along her frontiers. To the east, a whole new relationship is beginning to develop based on the model of the Moscow and Warsaw treaties, whilst in the west, the world role of the newly enlarged European community will have to be defined. It's in both Germany's and Europe's interests, therefore, that a strong German voice is heard in all the consultations and decisions which these new relationships imply. These are the wider issues in this election, and whoever wins on November the 19th, the result will show how far West Germans have understood them.
Dass wir unsere Politik der aktiven Friedenssicherung